think you can just walk in here and take over, do you? You're out of your mind.
Ditch those still reaches.
Get out of my hangar right now. I told you to hold back. You don't have the authority.
You are mistaken.
I do.
And this is my decision to make.
You are not getting on this plane. This is my flight. I have every right to be here, Mr. Thorne. I said no. You'll regret this.
Then I'll take that risk.
It's quick, free, and allows us to
We're taking
continue
the asset now,
bringing
sir.
you great
That's not what we agreed.
content.
Wait, you can't just take
Your
that.
support
You need to
means
understand the gravity of the
everything.
situation. If the parameters aren't met,
Let's
we proceed
keep
to the
this
original plan.
We
channel
have accounted for the
growing
parameters. The new plan is the
collectively.
only way this moves forward.
Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. You look lost. The words cut through the hangar like a blade. They didn't echo. They didn't need to. The private jet hangar was already quiet, the kind of silence that comes with money, authority, and the assumption that everyone present belongs. Polished concrete floors reflected the amber glow of industrial lights. A Gulfstream sat behind them, pristine and waiting, its engines still warm. The air smelled faintly of fuel and leather. The man who spoke stood a few steps away, silver-haired, expensive suit crystal glass in his hand. Whiskey caught the light as he pointed no accused with his free hand. His finger stopped inches from her chest. "This area isn't for people like you," he added, voice rising just enough for others to hear. She didn't blink. The black woman stood alone in the open space between the jet and the hangar doors, trench coat, belted tight boots, planted shoulders relaxed. She looked neither afraid nor defiant. She looked still, as if the world had paused to see what she would do next. Around them, movement stalled. A pilot near the nose of the jet froze mid-step. Two ground staff exchanged glances and quickly looked away. Someone else shifted, uncomfortable, pretending to check a tablet that suddenly needed checking. The man scoffed when she didn't answer. "I asked you a question," he said. "Are you waiting for someone? Because if you're not authorized, security can walk you out?" "Happens all the time." He smiled as if that settled it. She met his eyes at last. Calm, measured, unimpressed. But she still said nothing. That seemed to irritate him more than any argument could have. He took a step closer, his voice dropping sharper now. "You can't just wander into a restricted hangar. This jet is chartered. Private. Very expensive." He gestured casually over his shoulder at the aircraft as if ownership were a performance, not a fact. She followed his gesture with her eyes, then looked back at him. A faint crease formed between her brows, not from fear, but from recognition. She'd seen this before. Different cities. Different buildings. Same tone. Same certainty that she didn't belong. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now back to Ava Monroe. The man exhaled through his nose, annoyed. "Last chance," he said. "Who are you here with?" Ava shifted her weight just slightly. "Not a retreat. Not an advance. A recalibration. I'm early," she said finally. Her voice was low even. "That's all." He laughed. A short, humorless sound. Early for what she didn't answer. The silence stretched again, thicker this time. Not empty. Charged. Somewhere behind them, a radio crackled. A name was spoken. Then, another. A clipboard was set down a little too quickly. The man rolled his shoulders, clearly done with the inconvenience. "Unbelievable," he muttered, turning half away as if she'd already been dismissed. Security. Ava watched him. Not with anger. With patience. Because she wasn't lost. She was right where she needed to be. And this was only the first mistake. Ava Monroe didn't move. Not when the man turned away as if the decision had already been made. Not when his voice carried across the hangar loud enough to invite attention. Not when the word security landed in the air like a threat disguised as procedure. She stayed exactly where she was. The hangar felt larger, now emptier, in a way that magnified every sound. The soft hum of overhead lights. The distant click of cooling metal. Somewhere near the cockpit, a pilot cleared his throat and immediately regretted it. Ava's eyes traced the space without hurry. the jet's nose, the landing gear, the insignia near the door, fresh paint recently serviced. She noticed details most people missed. She always had, not because she needed to prove anything, but because she understood systems. How they worked. How they failed. Behind her, the massive hangar doors stood half-open, sunlight bleeding in through the gap, drawing a thin line across the floor like a boundary. On one side, movement, authority, assumptions. On the other exit, she didn't step toward either. The man glanced back, irritated to find her still there. His confidence wavered for half a second, just long enough to be dangerous. He covered it with a smirk. "You didn't hear me?" he said. "This isn't a waiting area." Ava met his gaze again. Calm. Unrushed. "I heard you," she replied. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It carried anyway. That drew more eyes. A ground crew member paused mid-walk. A woman in operations gear looked up from her tablet, her fingers frozen over the screen. Even the pilot near the jet shifted his stance, attention pulled despite himself. Silence had weight. Ava knew how to use it. She stood with her hands relaxed at her sides, posture, easy as if she belonged there, which only seemed to offend him more. People like him expected resistance or retreat, apologies or anger. They didn't know what to do with composure. He stepped closer again, lowering his voice as though that made him reasonable. "You're creating a scene," he said. "I'm trying to help you avoid embarrassment." Ava almost smiled. Almost. Instead, she looked past him just slightly toward the jet.
Toward the open door.
Toward the crew waiting for instructions that hadn't come yet. "I'm not the one escalating this," she said. The words were simple, factual, irrefutable. For the first time, uncertainty crept into the space between them. Not doubt about who she was, but doubt about whether he was as in control as he thought. A radio crackled again. This time, someone said her name. Quietly. Carefully. Ava didn't react. She didn't turn around. But she heard it. And so did someone else. The operations manager, mid-30s, sharp eyes, looked up from her tablet, brows knitting together. She checked the screen again. Then once more, slower this time. Her gaze lifted. It landed on Ava. And it didn't move away. The man was still talking, still asserting, still certain the room belonged to him. But the hangar had shifted.
Subtly.
Invisibly. Ava felt it the way she always did, like pressure changing before a storm. She remained where she was. Silent. Present. Unmoved. Because this part was never about speaking. It was about letting the room realize who had been standing in it all along. The room didn't explode. It tilted. That was how it always happened, quietly at first. A shift in posture. A change in tone. Authority tightening its grip when it sensed doubt creeping in. The man noticed it too. His jaw set. His shoulders squared. He raised his voice again, this time not just for Ava, but for everyone else. "She's not cleared to be here," he announced, gesturing toward her as if labeling a problem. "I don't know who let her in, but this is a restricted area. We have procedures." Procedures. The word landed heavy, familiar, and convenient. Ava listened without interruption. She had heard that word used as a shield before, as an excuse, as a way to turn bias into policy. The operations manager hesitated, tablet still in hand. She glanced from the screen to Ava, then back again. The name was there. Clear. Verified. Flagged with permissions that didn't belong to just anyone. Owner-level access. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. "Not yet." The man mistook the hesitation for agreement. He pressed on, encouraged by his own momentum. "People think they can just walk into places like this," he said, shaking his head with practiced disbelief. "Dress however they want. Act entitled, and then act surprised when they're stopped." A few staff members shifted uncomfortably. One looked down. Another pretended to focus on a checklist that hadn't changed in 10 minutes. Ava felt the words pass over her without lodging. She didn't respond to the insult because the insult wasn't the point. The assumption was, he'd already decided who she was, and more importantly, who she wasn't. He stepped toward the security desk near the hangar wall and waved a hand sharply. I need someone over here. Now. The radio crackled in response. On our way, a voice replied. That was enough to draw a reaction from the crowd. Not panic, just alignment. A subtle repositioning of bodies. People moved the way they always did when power made a demand. Space opened. Lines formed. All of it based on a story that hadn't been questioned. Ava remained still. The man turned back to her, confidence restored. You should have left when I gave you the chance, he said. This didn't have to get messy. Messy for who Ava asked. The question was calm, almost curious. It stopped him mid-sentence. He stared at her, clearly not expecting a reply, certainly not that one. Excuse me, for who she repeated evenly. Me or you, a murmur rippled through the hangar. Low. Controlled. Unignorable. The operations manager's fingers tightened around her tablet. She looked at Ava again, really looked this time. The posture, the stillness, the lack of fear. Then she looked back at the screen. The assumption was cracking. Security footsteps echoed from the far end of the hangar. Heavy, deliberate. Each step punctuated the silence. The man exhaled, satisfied. Good, he said. We'll clear this up right now. Ava watched the guards approach. 2 of them. Professional. Neutral. Doing what they were told. She didn't brace herself. She didn't prepare an argument. She simply waited. Because assumptions could carry a room only so far, and once they collapsed, everything else followed. The security guards slowed as they approached. Not because Ava said anything. Not because the man commanded them forward. But because something in the room no longer matched the story they'd been given. They stopped a few feet away, close enough to assert presence, far enough to hesitate. One of them glanced briefly at Ava's face, then at her hands. Calm. Empty. No threat. No panic. The other shifted his weight, eyes flicking toward the operations desk. Ma'am, the first guard began professional neutral. We've been told there's an access issue. Ava nodded once. A small, controlled acknowledgement? I'm aware, she said. That was it. No protest. No explanation. No urgency. The man scoffed from behind them. She's refusing to leave, he said sharply. That's the issue. Refusing, as if remaining still were an act of defiance. The guard turned slightly, instinctively checking the chain of command. Can I see your clearance, ma'am? Before Ava could answer, the operations manager stepped forward. Just one step. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it changed the geometry of the space. She positioned herself closer to Ava than to the man tablet held tight against her chest. I'm verifying now, she said carefully. The man spun toward her. There's nothing to verify, he snapped. She's not on the list. The operations manager didn't look up. Her eyes scanned the screen again, slower this time. Deliberate. She swallowed. Yes, she said. She is. The word hung in the air longer than it should have. The guards exchanged a glance. The man laughed too quickly. That's impossible. The operations manager lifted her head. Her name is on the manifest. Full clearance. A beat. Then another. The man's smile didn't disappear. It tightened. Hardened. Then someone made a mistake, he said. And we're correcting it. Ava watched him closely now. Not with anger, but with interest. This was the moment she recognized. The moment when power threatened chose force over truth. She spoke not to him, but to the guards. "I'm not leaving," she said evenly, "because I'm not in the wrong place." The guards didn't move. Not toward her. Not away. They stood suspended between instruction and instinct. Behind them, a few staff members had stopped pretending not to watch. One woman pressed her lips together, eyes narrowed. A man near the fuel station crossed his arms, unsettled. The power gap was visible now. On one side, volume entitlement and assumption. On the other, silence, verification and restraint. The man sensed it slipping. His voice rose again, sharper edged with irritation. "Are we doing this or not?" he demanded. "I don't have all day." Ava finally turned fully toward him. Her expression hadn't changed, but the air had. "You've already done enough," she said quietly. He opened his mouth to respond. And then the operations manager spoke again, this time louder. "There's no error," she said. "Her clearance is intentional." That was when the hangar truly fell silent, because everyone understood what that meant. Ava didn't smile. She didn't nod. She simply stood there, letting the gap widen, letting the truth do its work. The man stepped forward before anyone could stop him. Not fast. Not reckless. Just close enough to reclaim space. He moved into Ava's line, invading the quiet margin she'd kept between herself and everyone else. His shadow fell across the floor at her feet, sharp under the hangar lights. A deliberate choice. A reminder of who he believed should be standing taller. "This conversation is over," he said. "You've caused enough disruption." Disruption. As if her presence, not his behavior, had fractured the room. Ava didn't step back. She didn't step forward either, but she adjusted her stance subtly. A half turn of the shoulders. A grounding of her weight. Not defensive. Strategic. "I haven't disrupted anything," she replied. "I arrived." The guards tensed, not aggressively, instinctively. One of them lifted a hand, halfway uncertain whether to intervene or wait for instruction that no longer felt clear. The man scoffed. "You're not listening," he said. "This jet isn't yours. This hangar isn't public. And you," he paused, eyes flicking over her coat, her boots the absence of any visible credentials, "don't have business here." There it was. The sentence he'd been building toward. Ava felt the familiar tightening in her chest, not fear, but memory. Airports. Lobbies. Boardrooms. Moments where access was questioned not because of policy, but perception. She took one step back. Not in retreat, but to reestablish distance. The man mistook it instantly. "See," he said to the guards. "She knows she's wrong." The operations manager shook her head. "That's not what this is." But he ignored her now, fully committed to the narrative he'd chosen. He turned his attention back to Ava's voice, louder, edged with authority meant to embarrass. "You're going to leave this hangar," he said. "Now. Or we will escort you out." The word escort landed heavy. Sanitized. Threatening without appearing so. Ava inhaled slowly. Around them, the room leaned in. No one spoke. No one moved. The hangar had become a pressure chamber, every breath measured, every second stretching thin. She looked at the guards, not challengingly, not pleading. "I'm not resisting," she said. "But I'm not leaving." That was the line. Simple. Firm. Unmistakable. The man's patience snapped. His voice rose sharply, cutting through the quiet. "This is exactly the problem," he barked. "You people think rules don't apply to you?" The words hit harder than the gesture. A few heads snapped up. A few jaws tightened. The operations manager's face drained of color. Ava's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. A line crossed. Not outwardly visible, but final. She reached into her coat pocket. The man smirked, triumphant. "Finally," he said. "Calling someone to explain yourself." Ava pulled out her phone. She didn't unlock it right away. She let the moment sit long enough for the room to feel the shift, long enough for the man's confidence to waver just a fraction. Then she tapped the screen once. That was all. No speech. No warning. Just one controlled movement. The escalation had begun. And this time, it wasn't his. As Ava held the phone in her hand, the hangar began to blur at the edges. Not physically, but internally. The way the present sometimes loosened its grip when the past decided it had something to say. For a brief moment, she wasn't standing beneath steel beams and amber lights. She was 26 again. An airport terminal on the wrong side of town. Red-eye flight. Wrinkled blazer. Laptop bag heavy on one shoulder. She remembered the look then, too, the same quick scan, the same pause that lasted half a second too long. "Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass again." She'd handed it over without complaint. Watched the agent frown at the screen. Heard the tone change. "This gate is for priority passengers," she'd explained calmly. Shown the confirmation. Smiled even. It hadn't mattered. Security had come. Polite. Apologetic. Firm. She'd stood there while people walked past her, some curious, some annoyed, some pretending not to see. She'd been escorted a few steps away from the line. Not arrested. Not accused. Just displaced.
As if that were normal.
As if she were? The memory sharpened, not with anger, but with clarity. She remembered how quiet she'd been then. How she'd swallowed the humiliation because she needed the flight. Needed the meeting. Needed to prove herself worthy of rooms that were never designed with her in mind. Back then, she had left. Back then, she had adjusted. The hangar snapped back into focus. The man was still talking. Still asserting. Still convinced that volume equaled authority. The guards remained frozen in place, caught between instruction and unease. Ava's grip on the phone tightened, not from fear, but from resolve. Another memory surfaced. Years later, a boardroom. Frosted glass. A question asked too casually. "Who are you here with?" She'd answered that one differently. She always did eventually. Ava looked up now, eyes steady, present fully in the moment again. The flashback didn't weaken her, it anchored her. Reminded her why she'd built what she'd built. Why she never raised her voice. Why she trusted systems over tempers. The man mistook her silence for indecision. "You're making a mistake," he said, voice lower, now edged with warning. "Whatever you think you're doing, it won't end well." Ava met his gaze. "I know," she said. But she wasn't talking about herself. She tapped the screen again, bringing the call to her ear. Still, no theatrics. No pacing. Just a quiet certainty. "Yes," she said softly. "It's me." The operations manager watched her closely, now recognition dawning not of status, but of command. The way Ava spoke wasn't defensive. It wasn't reactive. It was procedural. The guards noticed it too. One of them straightened slightly. The other glanced back toward the desk, waiting for an update that hadn't come yet, but would. Ava lowered the phone just enough to speak one last sentence into it. "Proceed as discussed." Then she slipped it back into her coat. The man stared at her, unsettled for the first time. "Who did you call?" he demanded. Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. The flashback faded completely, now replaced by something stronger than memory momentum. The kind that couldn't be reversed once it started moving. She stood exactly where she was. Not because she was stuck, but because for the first time in the hangar, everything else was about to move around her. The first sign wasn't loud. It was a breath. A sharp inhale from somewhere behind the operations desk, quick, involuntary, impossible to miss once you were listening for it. The operations manager stared at her tablet as if the screen had just changed languages. Her thumb hovered over the display, frozen. Then she looked up at Ava again, eyes searching, not confused, but recalibrating. She cleared her throat. "I need a moment," she said. The man scoffed. For what she didn't answer him. She stepped slightly to the side, angling the tablet away from his view, and tapped once. Then again. Slower. Deliberate. Her jaw tightened. One of the guards noticed, so the man pressed. Is this getting resolved or not? The operations manager finally spoke, voice steady but careful. Her access isn't provisional. What does that mean? He snapped. It means, she said, choosing each word she wasn't added by mistake. The hangar shifted again, this time audibly. Shoes scuffed. A radio clicked off mid-static. Someone near the fuel station muttered something under their breath. The man laughed too loudly. Everyone gets added by mistake, he said. Fix it. She shook her head. This isn't something I can't fix. That did it. Another staff member stepped closer, a younger woman from ground crew, eyes wide but focused. She had been watching Ava from the beginning, tracking the stillness, the restraint. Now she spoke before she could talk herself out of it. I saw the name earlier, she said. Quiet. Clear. On the flight brief. The man spun on her. You're mistaken. I'm not, she replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice. It was flagged. High level. The guards exchanged another look. One of them lifted his radio slightly, then hesitated, waiting. The operations manager nodded once, as if a final piece had locked into place. She turned the tablet toward the guards, just enough for them to see the header. The designation. The clearance, tier. Their posture changed immediately. Not dramatic. Not sudden. Professional. Sir, one of them said to the man, we need to pause. Pause, he barked. For what? For verification, the guard replied. Standard. The word landed differently now. Standard for her. The man looked around, realizing too late that the room had stopped following him. Faces that once deferred were now watching. Measuring. Reconsidering. Ava hadn't moved. She hadn't spoken since the call. She stood where she always had, letting the witness speak, for her not to defend, but to confirm. The operations manager took a breath and said it plainly, voice no longer tentative. She's cleared at a level above this hangar. Silence fell clean and absolute. The man opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. That's not possible, he said, but the certainty was gone. Ava finally spoke, not to correct him, not to explain. Thank you, she said quietly to the room. Not as gratitude, as acknowledgement. The witness had awakened. And once truth was spoken out loud, there was no putting it back to sleep. The hangar didn't erupt. There was no shouting, no sudden rush, no dramatic reversal yet. Just a pause, heavy, deliberate, as everyone adjusted to the fact that something irreversible had begun. The man broke the silence first, forcing a laugh that landed flat. This is getting ridiculous, he said. We're standing around because of a clerical label. No one answered him. The guards didn't move. Not toward Ava. Not toward him. They stood centered now, neutral, in a way that no longer favored his authority. Ava felt the shift settle in her chest. Not relief, not satisfaction. Alignment. This was the moment she always waited for. The point where action replaced argument. She reached into her coat again, slow enough that no one mistook the gesture for panic. Her phone was already unlocked when it came into view. One clean motion. One controlled breath. The man watched closely, eyes narrowed. You think one call changes anything, he said? I don't know who you think. Ava raised her hand slightly. Not to silence him. To signal completion. I've already done what I needed to do, she said. That stopped him. Not because of the words, but because of the certainty behind them. Across the hangar, the operations manager's tablet vibrated. She looked down instinctively, then froze. Her eyes widened, not in shock but recognition. She straightened posture, shifting from reactive to formal. Yes, she said quietly. Understood. The guards' radios chimed one after the other. Short bursts. Coded. Efficient. The kind of communication that didn't ask permission. The man's confidence faltered visibly now. "What's happening?" he demanded. Why is everyone acting like Ava turned her attention to him fully for the first time since the witness spoke? "You assumed this was about you?" she said evenly. "It isn't." She slid the phone back into her pocket. No threats. No warnings. Just procedure in motion. The operations manager took a step forward, voice calm but official. "We're initiating a hold," she said. "All movements are paused, pending executive confirmation." "Executive," the man repeated, incredulous. From who Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. The hangar doors began to close, not fully, but enough to change the acoustics. The outside noise dimmed. The space tightened. Intentional. A few staff members shifted to new positions without being told. The jet's lights powered down to standby. Subtle signals visible only to those who understood how systems spoke to each other. The man looked around, now truly unsettled. "You can't just," he stopped, realizing he no longer knew who you was. Ava stood quietly as the machinery of authority realigned itself around her. This was the quiet move. No spectacle. No revenge. Just the calm execution of power activated, acknowledged, and already too far along to stop. The first minute passed without ceremony. No announcements. No raised voices. Just the soft mechanical certainty of systems doing exactly what they were designed to do once set in motion. A digital clock above the hangar office ticked forward. 011. Ava noticed it without looking. She had always been aware of time not as urgency, but as leverage. Time revealed who panicked, who overreached, who tried to claw back control instead of accepting that it had already shifted. The man paced now short steps, restrained frustration leaking through every movement. He pulled his phone from his pocket thumb, jabbing at the screen harder than necessary. "Get me someone," he muttered. "Now." No response came quickly enough. Across the hangar, the guards stood at ease but alert. Their stance had changed, not aggressive, not submissive. Aligned. They weren't watching Ava anymore. They were watching him. The operations manager remained near her desk tablet in hand posture, upright voice clipped as she responded to updates only she could see. Each vibration drew a quiet acknowledgement. Each acknowledgement tightened the invisible net around the situation. 05. Ava shifted her weight slightly, adjusting the fall of her coat. That was all. No pacing. No checking her phone. No outward sign that the next 15 minutes mattered at all. But they did. The man stopped pacing and turned toward her again, trying a different angle. His voice dropped, smoothed. "Look," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Clearly, there's been some confusion. No need to make this bigger than it is." Ava didn't respond. 07. He stepped closer, but the guards moved first this time. Just half a step. Enough. He stopped. The realization hit him slowly, then all at once. He was no longer directing the room. 010. A new presence entered, not physically, but perceptibly. A call routed. A confirmation logged. Somewhere far beyond the hangar, someone with real authority was reading a report that included timestamps, names, and video feeds. Ava had built her career on moments like this. Not confrontations, but confirmations. The operations manager's tablet chimed again. She inhaled once, steadying herself, then spoke. "Executive review has been initiated," she said. "All actions from this point forward are recorded." The man's face drained of color. "Recorded," he repeated. For what no one answered. 014. The hangar felt smaller now. The walls closer. The air denser. Every sound, every footstep, every breath felt amplified. Ava finally looked at the clock. 015. She met the man's gaze, not triumphantly, not cruelly. Just honestly. This is the part where it feels like you still have time, she said quietly. You don't. 017. His phone buzzed at last. He answered too quickly. Yes, hello, I need... He stopped mid-sentence, eyes widening slightly as he listened. His posture collapsed inward, confidence draining word by word. 019. Ava turned away from him, not dismissively but decisively. Her attention shifted to the jet, to the crew waiting calmly, to the space that had finally remembered who it belonged to. 020. The clock clicked forward, and with it, the last illusion of control disappeared. The hangar went still in a way that felt final, not tense, resolved. The man ended the call slowly, as if speed might make the words he'd just heard less real. His hand lingered near his earphone, forgotten eyes, unfocused. When he looked up again, he wasn't looking for authority anymore. He was looking for an exit. Ava turned back toward him, not abruptly, not dramatically. Just enough to bring him back into the moment he could no longer escape. You asked earlier who I was here with, she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. She took one step forward, not to intimidate, to be heard. I'm here with the board, she continued. With flight operations, and with every system you tried to weaponize against me. The words didn't echo. They landed. The operations manager inhaled sharply, then straightened as if summoned by protocol she'd never expected to witness firsthand. One of the guards lowered his radio eyes forward, now posture unmistakably formal. The man shook his head once as if denial might still save him. That doesn't make sense, he muttered. You didn't say I didn't need to, Ava said. She held his gaze unwavering. You told security to remove me from a hangar, she went on, each word measured, deliberate. You questioned my right to be near an aircraft I hold controlling interest in. A murmur rippled through the room, quiet, stunned, irreversible. Ava didn't raise her voice. You tried to erase me, she said from a space I helped build. The man's mouth opened, then closed. His certainty had nowhere left to stand. I am Ava Monroe, she said. Chief Executive Officer. Majority shareholder. And the reason this aircraft is cleared to fly today? Silence. Not the awkward kind. The reverent kind. The guard shifted not toward her but away from him. The operations manager's tablet chimed once more, confirmation locking in what had already become undeniable. Ava didn't wait for an apology. She didn't need one. The problem wasn't that you didn't know who I was, she said quietly. The problem is how easily you decided I didn't belong. She turned slightly attention, returning to the jet, to the crew, to the work waiting patiently behind her. Resume operations, she said. And just like that, the room obeyed. The reveal wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Power had finally spoken in its own voice. The change didn't come with drama. It came with procedure. The operations manager moved first, not hurried, not hesitant. She tapped her tablet twice, then once more, eyes steady, now voice crisp as she spoke into her headset. Access privileges revoked, she said. Effective immediately. A soft chime answered her. Then another. Across the hangar, the man's phone vibrated in his hand. He looked down instinctively, confusion flickering across his face as notification after notification stacked on the screen, credentials, disabled permissions, suspended contact removed from the chain. He laughed once. Weak. Disbelieving. This is insane, he said. You can't just... One of the guards stepped forward. Not aggressively. Formally. Sir, he said, we need you to step away from the aircraft. The words hit harder than any accusation. Step away, the man repeated. From the aircraft, the guard said again evenly. The distinction mattered. The man looked around, searching for support that no longer existed. The staff who had deferred to him minutes earlier now avoided his eyes. A few had turned their bodies subtly toward Ava, toward the jet, toward the future of the room. Another chime sounded. The operations manager inhaled once and spoke again. Security escort is reassigned. reassigned. The man's shoulders sagged under the weight of the word. You're making a mistake, he said, but his voice lacked force now. This will blow back on all of you. Ava didn't respond. She didn't need to. The guard gestured toward the exit not with a hand, but with a shift in stance that made the path unmistakably clear. 2 steps behind him, another guard mirrored the movement. A corridor formed where authority once stood. The man hesitated, then complied, not because he understood, but because there was nothing left to resist with. As he passed Ava, he slowed as if expecting a final word. A glance. A reaction. She gave him neither. Her attention was already elsewhere on the crew, restarting their checks on the jet lights, returning to full power on a system correcting itself in real time. Behind her, the hangar returned to motion. Purposeful. Ordered. Clean. The collapse wasn't loud. It was efficient. And when the doors closed behind the man sealing him out of the space, he tried to control the room, didn't celebrate. It simply continued. Because power, when it's real, doesn't linger on what falls. It moves forward. The jet engines hummed softly now, a low, steady sound that filled the hangar with purpose. Checklist items were called out. Doors were secured. Lights along the fuselage blinked in sequence, signaling readiness. Everything moved the way it was supposed to, clean, efficient, unquestioned. Ava watched it all from a short distance, hands relaxed at her sides. No one crowded her. No one interrupted. They didn't need to. The operations manager approached carefully, stopping a respectful distance away. Everything is set, she said. We're ready whenever you are. Ava nodded once. Good. That was enough. She took a few steps forward, boots echoing lightly against the concrete. The crew paused, not because they were told to, but because attention naturally followed her.
She hadn't asked for silence yet, it settled anyway.
Ava turned not to command, not to reprimand, but to acknowledge the room. What happened here, she said calmly, wasn't a misunderstanding. No one spoke. It was a decision, she continued. A decision made quickly, confidently, and without facts. Her voice didn't carry anger. It carried clarity. I didn't raise my voice, she said. I didn't demand respect. I didn't explain myself. She let that sink in. I let the system speak. The operations manager lowered her eyes, absorbing the weight of it. A few crew members nodded almost imperceptibly, not in agreement, but in recognition. Ava shifted her gaze to the hangar doors, the same doors that had moments ago felt like an exit meant for her. They told me I didn't belong, she said quietly. But belonging was never the question. She paused. Standards were. The jet's door opened fully now, steps extending with a soft hydraulic hiss. The path was clear. Ava took one last look around the hangar, not to claim it, not to savor the moment, but to leave it better aligned than she'd found it. Resume, she said, and the room did. She ascended the steps without ceremony. No applause. No final glance back. Just forward motion. As the door closed behind her and the engines powered up, the hangar returned to its rhythm, changed but intact. Outside, the aircraft rolled smoothly toward the runway. Inside, Ava settled into her seat, gaze, steady expression, calm. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't threatened. She hadn't needed to. She had simply raised the standard and let everything else fall into place.